Hope you enjoyed the last panel. It was really great. This panel, we're actually going to be talking about the golden age of e-commerce. And with any golden age, there's always issues, challenges, but then also opportunities. I have got a fantastic group up here. These are also titans in their own right in another part of the industry. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves, talk about the company you're with, and where you're playing inside of the supply chain, so everyone can kind of understand our perspectives.
Great, and thanks, Caroline. Thanks for having me on the panel. My name is Bart de Monk. I've been in supply chain for about 30 years, in logistics about 25. If you do hear a little bit of an accent, that's because I started my career back in my home country of Belgium, in the Benelux in Europe. So I started my career there in logistics, running asset-based trucking companies, and in the last 18 years been here in the US, based out of Dallas, Texas. The last 8 years I'd spent as an industry analyst with a company called Gartner research firm, where I led all of their transportation technology coverage. And 4 weeks ago, I started a new job. Really, it really started with everything that's happening in logistics in the last few years, having been on the trucking side, on the shipper side with PepsiCo. And then as an analyst, and I saw all this incredibly disruptive stuff happening, but at the same time, all of this incredibly exciting things happening with technologies and adoption of technology, which we really didn't see a lot in the previous kind of 25 years. So that made me say, you know what, instead of standing on the sideline as an advisor, let me have one more kind of play at this game and dive back in. And so I decided to join a tech firm. I actually joined Project 44 as their chief industry officer. And we talked a lot in the previous session about how do you connect all of these different disparate systems and disparate players. And that's really what Project 44 is. Its mission is to be the connective issue between all of these players and really do that across all modes across the globe.
Good morning. My name is Andrew Serby. I am the founder of Entermarket. Entermarket is a third-party logistics company that specializes in e-commerce fulfillment and retail fulfillment. So we do both the e-commerce side. Our background, I started the company about 21 years ago, and we were really focused on retail for years and shipping to mom and pop retailers and every major retailer in the US. And we continue to do that. But about 7 years ago, I started to focus the company on e-commerce and what does that look like. And we've created a company that helps brands provide that service to retail and to e-commerce. And a lot of our competitors are focusing on, they're stuck in retail or they're kind of e-commerce only. And I think that combination is very important for brands to be able to have one cohesive solution for both their retail and their e-commerce business. So,
Bill Catania, founder and CEO of OneRail. Happy to be here today. I didn't grow up in the industry, which I'm proud of, because I feel like I'm bringing a fresh set of eyes. And we have an awesome team that brings 20 and 30 years of experience, and people like me that are kind of newbies that started this thing that said, hey, I'm a disgruntled customer and I don't like how this works. And that's how I got involved in the industry. I spent about 10 years building retail technology with a company called MDOT that I started. And that company today processes around 70% of the digital paperless coupons in the US. That was a big challenge, solving that problem. We had to connect the point of sale to the cloud to run real-time transactions. We had to aggregate all the different coupon providers in the industry to make it work. It took about 10 years to get it to scale, and today it's in 40,000 stores. So about a year after selling that company and then selling the acquirer that bought me, I'm standing in a Lowe's home improvement store and bought a refrigerator. When your refrigerator dies, you don't usually get to decide, how much time you have to salvage all your food. And so my food is in coolers at the house. I go to Lowe's, they're offering free delivery, and they told me it would take 10 days after I bought it. And so I'm standing there, I'm looking for different solutions, Uber for delivery, Uber for moving, anything. Couldn't find anything, went home, got my truck, and here I am 7 years later. And ironically, today, I'm proud of this, at 9:42 a.m., we did our first delivery for Lowe's. We signed Lowe's, and today we went live with Lowe's. So it all comes full circle for me today. But I'm really glad to be here. OneRail is a solution that's very unique. We have an operating system that's like a decision engine for delivery. So we're making all kinds of instant decisions, whether to dispatch to own fleet or external fleet. And then we've aggregated about 9.2 million drivers in our network that relate to entities like Uber and Lyft and Postmates, and then a ton of super regionals and even local operators that may have 5 or 10 trucks. So we've aggregated this massive pool of supply. We don't believe there's a capacity problem. I think there was a lot of great comments on this last panel. Jack, I think, said we don't have a capacity problem. We have a problem getting efficiency out of the capacity we have. That's entirely what OneRail does, is figure out how to use the capacity that's out there. And happy to provide some best practices that we see our customers using and that we see in the industry, and some that we're implementing at OneRail.
Great. Thank you guys all for being here. So what we thought we might do to start the panel is kind of tie what you heard earlier into the issues, from the front end of the supply chain and how it trickles down and affects both last mile, final mile, and e-com. So Bart, I might call on you to kind of join the two and talk about those issues.
Yeah, sure. So when we talk about e-commerce, I guess everyone has ordered something online, right? And what we already saw the last 5 years, that e-commerce started growing very, very rapidly. But then this small thing occurred, COVID, right? And all of a sudden, it just extrapolated its growth. So even today, right, 2 years after COVID, we still see incremental growth in e-commerce and how that affects kind of the entire way of fulfilling that, because it's not just last mile. And obviously, if you look at e-commerce, we have to deal with a lot of issues, right? So one issue you could have is inventory problems. So if China's closed, how are we going to get that inventory, right? We heard this morning about 300 ships sitting there in the port of Shanghai, so those ships aren't coming into the US anytime soon. So one issue, you're not going to have the inventory. Second problem is, if you do have the inventory, the ship is on its way, it's going to go to Long Beach or any other port, it's going to sit there, right? It's going to take a while before it goes to its berth, before it gets unloaded. And then if you're lucky, hopefully, we will have one of these intermodal drayage providers that'll pick it up, get it to a DC, and then it has to go from a DC to maybe a local fulfillment center or a hyper-local fulfillment center. It's highly automated. And then you have to be able to find the capacity to go and deliver it. And that is even if you have the warehouse labor. And we're seeing UPS and FedEx not only struggling with getting enough capacity from a transportation perspective, but also in the warehouse, right? There's warehouses that only are 60 to 70% where they have warehouse labor to basically pick the product. And then when you ship it, maybe then you're lucky enough that that product arrives on time if there's no delays in transportation. And meantime, you have a customer that is continuously going like, I want it, and I want it now, and I want you to give me the best customer experience. So the bad part of it is it's a lot of challenges, right? But just as they used to say, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, guess what? Disruption is the mother of digital transformation. So with all of these issues which create headaches for a lot of people, it's actually been the best time for technology, for the growth of technology companies, and obviously for VCs and private equity companies who saw that and started massively investing in transportation technology, anywhere from TMS to digital freight to last mile to visibility. So there's a great opportunity here, right? So yes, there's a cloud, but behind every cloud, there's also sunshine. So the great thing is that, and again, having been in the logistics industry for 25 years, and 25 years ago, when we started improving processes, and forgive me, but I came out of GE, so we did a lot of Six Sigma, right? And we started improving processes. And we said, what else can we do to make these processes much more efficient? And remember, this was the mid-90s. We said, let's use technology. Let's use TMS on the non-asset-based side, and let's use routing solutions and telematics on the asset-based side. And back then, that wasn't very popular. And people go, why would you use technology? And it was very hard to convince people the value of technology and to invest in technology when it was so expensive and hard to implement. Now, fast forward to 25 years, where we're landed now, where you have a lot of choice in technologies going from free solutions to still very expensive solutions, but from solutions that are very consumable, meaning they're very easy to implement, they get you to value very quickly, and they really help you to run your business more efficiently. And so I think that is the big change that we're seeing in supply chain, that I've seen in logistics, is this change in how people approach the technology and how they're really able to adapt the technology in much larger numbers to create a lot more value and really help them to survive in this time of disruption and to get more efficiency in their processes.
I thought I would take you guys through, I thought the presentation this morning was great, and I wanted to kind of tie it how all this supply chain is affecting the actual warehouses. So what happened, the pandemic hit, and the amount of orders on e-commerce went up by, some companies we saw 10 times growth, some clients we saw 40 times growth. One example of that was we're actually one of the largest shippers of jigsaw puzzles in the US, and we could ship as many jigsaw puzzles as physically possible. The orders just never stopped coming in. And what happened to the brands is they could only sell the inventory they had. They couldn't get any more inventory. So while their sales were unprecedented, they were actually disappointed because they could have sold more. And so what has happened because of the supply chain problems is that the brands are building up so much inventory because it's so unreliable when the goods are going to come in and how long it's taking, that the warehouses in this country are overstuffed. We have so many goods, it's ridiculous. And we're having to lease more space and more space. There's so much demand for space in this country right now because of the supply chain problem. So that's one of the main effects of what is, you heard this morning, and how it's actually affecting the warehouses and the brands. So they're building up inventories at a higher level, and which is scary in the end to have, but they feel like they have no choice. So that's really what's happening in the industry. You're just seeing tremendous growth of inventory in this country. And I think that is a little bit of a scary thing in the big picture. But when the brands have missed opportunities, they tend to go the other direction. And then now my guess is that we'll have inventories out pretty far this year, and then it'll start to pare back a little bit next year. But the problem with that is they buy so much of what they think, and they don't have enough of what's starting to sell, so their inventories are out of balance. And so it's a big challenge for the brands right now, and it's driven by this supply chain problem.
So yeah, I think this has been an interesting experience growing this company during a pandemic. Couldn't have asked for a more interesting challenge. But for us, just about every customer we work with had a roadmap, and they had a plan, and that plan was a 5-year plan that's been forced into an 18-month plan or a 2-year plan. So for us, it's been an interesting journey because we would engage, large retailers and product distributors, and they knew exactly what they wanted, but they were still kind of thinking in the 2015s, right? The 2016, 17s. They were going to implement a multitude of solutions to solve their problem. But in 2022, 2020, 2021, there's been a really, I think, great acceleration, per Weston's point, about APIs, right? A few years ago, P44, I give them a lot of credit for driving the concept of an API-first strategy, and that's what we do too. And that roadmap has been condensed, so it's accelerated everything. And there's really 4 things that we see shippers in terms of common threads that they're looking for in their solutions. They're looking for flexibility. They're looking for, and so how that translates to what we do at OneRail, when I had the idea, when I couldn't get my refrigerator delivered, we went down the path of first becoming a courier and then becoming a platform and an aggregator. So we were a courier for 2 or 3 years, a digitally connected courier. But what we learned was there's this mindset that's lived in transportation for a long time, which I call static supply. And so it's the model where I have a zip code, and that zip code is connected to courier or carrier A, and this zip code is connected to courier or carrier B. And if the carrier or courier doesn't have enough capacity, too bad, so sad, there's going to be an exception. And we saw that problem and said, well, why couldn't there be 30 carriers that are real? So the second thing is real time. real-time connectivity is number 2. First is flexibility, being able to have a solution that has depth to it and can also go multimodal, so across modes. Final mile, of course, isn't just courier, it's LTL, it's full truckload, it's parcel. So that flexibility can go vertically and horizontally. The second thing, again, is real-time. If you don't have real-time connectivity, you're really not going to succeed in the new economy. And I believe, much like the previous group, we actually won't support Excel. It's one of my tenets, is that every single delivery must be real-time connected. And we've not had a problem aggregating carriers and couriers. We have 450 of them that represent 9 million drivers. So we have the depth, and we've put that tenet down, and we've said there's no plan B. You must be connected. We give them an app if they need it. They must be real-time. You have to be vigilant and command that, or that change won't happen. Visibility is everything. The customer, we commissioned some research through a Forbes Council member. We interviewed, I think it was 150 retailers, and overwhelmingly, customers have said, 94% of customers have said, they don't blame FedEx, they don't blame Roadie, they don't blame Deliv when they were in business. They blame the retailer. They blame the product manufacturer. And that's, that has put a lot of pressure on retailers and product manufacturers to elevate their game, to invest, which is then, of course, translated to private equity and venture capital, investing as well. So it's really spun up. I think the customer has driven that dust up more than anybody, because they've raised their bar. And who raised that bar ultimately? It was Amazon, right? We're all trying to give shippers the tools that Amazon has lost a lot of money utilizing in the marketplace for a long time to build a great business. So those are just a few of the common threads that we see. It's a very exciting time to be in the space. It's a very challenging time. The common thread, I think those that are succeeding are just great problem solvers. They may not have come from the space, but they see the problems. And I give the companies that are here today a lot of credit for that. Building teams that are solving problems. That's all we're doing. But yeah, those are the threads that we see as a response to COVID.
Great. So, the challenge of modern day e-com, let's kind of dig a little bit deeper, into the issues affecting the different parties, carriers and the shippers first, and then maybe we'll talk about customer expectations after that. So, Bart, do you want to take it earlier?
Yeah, very good. So obviously with carriers, if you look at it from their perspective, right, one big issue was the incredibly high demand that they've had. So you have the last mile carriers, obviously the UPSs and FedExes have seen their volumes go up, which means they need more labor, warehouse personnel. They need more truck drivers. At the same time, we've seen the shortage that we have with the long haul over the road truck drivers. So that's part of the issue where we have that shortage, because a lot of people said, hey, we can do local work and we home every day because there's so much demand for last mile drivers that we can do that, make a good living, and be home every night. And then the other part is you see a lot of 3PLs that were doing a lot of full truckload and LTL trucking that now all of a sudden their retailers or their manufacturers, by the way, are saying, hey, you also need to provide last mile services. So all of a sudden they have to change their models, they have to change their systems, they have to change their asset base, their labor that's working on that. Because to be honest, that's the other part. Everyone today does e-commerce. I left PepsiCo about 8 years ago. PepsiCo back then, their last mile was getting their product to a store, where it's a large format store like a Walmart, or it's a small format store like a 7-Eleven. And the customer would go there, and they would buy the product there. Now, the only parcel we would do was like if you had a small bar and you maybe consumed 1 or 2 cases of chips at the bar, we would kind of FedEx that to you, and you would get that. Well, today, if you look at PepsiCo, and their biggest increase in revenue is actually coming from people ordering Pepsi, other beverages, and snacks on PepsiCo or Frito-Lay.com. So everyone today has become, an e-commerce retailer. And for a lot of companies, it's not just the issue of how do you deal with that, but it's on the carrier side as well. How do I become, not being a specialized last mile, company, how do I, provide that service to customer? And for the ones that were already specialized, how do I, one, extend my asset base, but also how do I extend other services? So I think Bill, you said earlier, right? If you want to have a fridge, want to have it delivered, that's not typically what UPS and FedEx does, because they do mainly, kind of smaller item pieces. And for that, you need special same-day deliver and oversized, right? And that's why UPS acquired Roadie, to be able to provide those additional services. So although obviously shippers have a lot of complexity shipping it, carriers have their equal part of complexities to change our models, change the technology they use. But again, the common thread across all of this is, you can only be successful if shipper and carriers communicate accordingly. You have discussions, you collaborate, but then also have systems that hopefully talk to each other, because otherwise somewhere along the line you're going to be disconnected. You're not going to have a good delivery, and today I would say the customer experience is equal to the delivery experience. So if you mess up that delivery, you have a customer that's probably not going to come back and order again from you.
My perspective is the customer experience is driven by the fact that they want their orders shipped out fast, and the brands want to give them a custom solution. So if you're a cosmetic company and your clients order online, they want that box when it delivers to feel like it's a special package. So the challenges for warehouses today is they have to provide a custom service for every brand in the warehouse. And the key to that is just total flexibility and organization to be able to provide custom boxes, custom material, and providing it and packing it in a way that, when that woman opens that box of cosmetics, that they feel like they got a present every time, and it's special. And so the key to e-commerce today is providing a fast, custom solution. I would actually argue that the most important thing from a speed perspective is actually that they get a confirmation that it's shipped. More important than actually that it delivers quickly. So people, if they freak out if they don't get a confirmation within the same day, the next day at the absolute latest. But they don't freak out if it takes a day, or 2 days, 3 days to actually get the box. So the key to actual e-commerce is the warehouses have to ship fast. They have to do it in a customized way, and that ship order confirmation is the key to everything. All the customer service complaints for the brands come when the customer does not get a ship order confirmation. The customers have adapted to the unreliability of FedEx and UPS, and USPS is completely unreliable. And so I just think that there's a little misconception that everyone wants everything to deliver in a day. And speed is very important. And over time, I think that becomes more and more important that, that's why warehouses are going to need locations all throughout the country to support, the goods getting there in 1 to 2 days. But right now, the customers really care about just getting that ship order confirmation, which is a little counterintuitive to what most people think.
Could not agree more with that. It's funny, if the adage, between my wife and I, we have 6 kids, so we know kids pretty well. You give a kid a box, they're happy, you buy that expensive toy, they really don't care. They're playing with it for like 2 hours. The least technical thing we do is we take all 450 delivery companies, they all send a message differently. And in the old world of static supply, where there was a courier and a zip code, that courier or carrier is the one sending the messages to the customer. And what we've done, and this is another tenet, is we are shipper-centric. And being shipper-centric means we're going to take DoorDash's message and Uber's message and Lyft's message and Courier Express's, all their messages, and we're going to translate those into one common message from the shipper, from the brand. So now you're getting a message from Tractor Supply, from PepsiCo, from Caterpillar. That's made a huge difference. And the customer likes it too. The shipper loves it because they don't like being disintermediated. But who really loves it is the customer, because they see exactly every status notification. Could not agree more. That, to me, that's one of the most, and that's the lowest tech thing we do. It's the exhaust of what we do. But it's the most.
People think it's all about getting it there fast, but
Right.
It's actually just communication.
100%.
All the customer service stops when their customer is communicated to. Even if they're not happy with what you're communicating, they don't complain. They just complain when there's silence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, right? So a lot of things, as we discussed, can go wrong, right? The inventory can't be there, or something's going to be late. But the one thing you can provide is transparency to the customer, right? And create, like Bill said, the visibility, right? How do you make sure that you keep the customer in the loop? And that accounts for the big shipments too, right? I mean, when I was at PepsiCo, it wasn't always bad to be late, right? But what was bad was to be late and not let the customer know. If you call ahead of time and saying, hey, you know what? That shipment's going to be late. Instead of 4 o'clock, we're going to be there at 6 o'clock. Sometimes they would go like, hey, that actually works out better for us because our docks were completely overbooked at 4 o'clock, so 6 o'clock is actually better. But it's communication. How do you do the right communication? Also with consumers, don't over-communicate, right? You don't need every 2 seconds a message saying, hey, it's still on time, we're still going to be there. So you don't have to do it that way. Now, another part which I think is also very important in customer experience, which is a topic we haven't maybe with the right reason, or I don't know, maybe there's a reason why we haven't attacked it today yet, but you hear it everywhere, we haven't mentioned it, is sustainability. And consumers are very aware about sustainability. And that started with making sure that companies would have sustainable products. And then they started focusing on the packaging. Do we have sustainable packaging? Well, now a lot more, especially the younger generations, are looking, how is that transportation done? Is that sustainable? And so I think we have a great opportunity by using the technology to actually influence our consumers, kind of pre-purchase, to give them options, to give them insight into carbon footprints, and to say, hey, you know what? If you want it today, this afternoon, this is the cost, this is the available time slots, but also this is the carbon footprint. Now, it doesn't always mean it's bad, because if I'm going to ship to Bart and I already got a shipment that I had planned to ship to Bart's neighbor, maybe that actually has a much lower carbon footprint. But if I'm rushing a truck somewhere or a van somewhere just to deliver to Bart because he really wants that shirt the same day, look at the carbon footprint that has. So I think we have to be aware that consumers, their experience and their view on sustainability is changing. A good example was Timberland did this initiative, and what they said to customers, like, instead of doing 2-day shipping, which is pretty much standard nowadays, if you choose for 5 to 8 day shipping, we will plant a tree for every shipment that you have. And they actually saw about 20 to 22% of customers taking advantage of that. So there is hope, right? Obviously, Amazon's gone the other way. It's like, let's go faster and faster and faster. And I was telling my panel team here earlier that up to like 2-3 years ago, when I was at Parcel Forum, I would say if you look at the speed at which Amazon is going down in that lead time, you know, by 2025, we will receive the shipments before we've even placed the order. Now, you can't use that anymore today because everyone's going to go like, yeah, but of course, Bart, because we have AI, we can predict what you're going to order. But that wasn't the point, right? It's like there has to be at some point a stop where we go like, the faster we go, the less we create opportunities to optimize our shipments. And that's why you're also seeing companies starting to collaborate. Companies like, Walmart, who's collaborating with Home Depot. There's other ones like American Eagle Outfitters that's trying to do that with other retailers. But again, what do you need for that? You need technology, right? Because it's the technology, especially these cloud solutions, that allow you to connect with all these other companies to give you the opportunity to collaborate.
That's great. And for the record, I actually have a question on here about sustainability. I didn't want to disappoint. Okay, great. So I guess, we talked about visibility and transparency for the consumer. But if you have to sum it up, what does a happy customer look like now? And you can take that from any vantage point you'd like.
Yeah, I think, and this is an important thing for shippers to note. And again, it's exactly what Bart and Andrew just said. It's not about speed. Speed is great. Speed is awesome, but if you read the press on some of these companies like Gorillas, which is an instant grocery delivery, they're flaming out. It's not working. Customers don't really need their groceries in 10 minutes is the reality, and it's a great example of a solution being driven to a customer that doesn't really solve their problem. And they're just one of several that are really struggling right now, if you can believe what you read anyway. But the customer requires dependability and reliability. And they require communication. And it's really that simple. Reliability, if you say you're gonna hit an SLA, hit it, and if you're not, let them know. And that's an approach we took at OneRail that's also very unique. We have our operating system, we have our marketplace of couriers, and we actually manage every delivery. So we're triangulating communication between a courier, the store, fleet ops, all day long for every single delivery we do. And what our technology is doing is it's preventing exceptions from happening because it's making a smarter dispatch decision. But to have that human hand, it just removes more friction and it creates a happier customer. I just had a large appliance company come to our office, and he had some really great empirical data around the fact, before they offered any visibility and communication to customers, they could have an on-time rate of 85, 86%, and they had a net promoter score that was actually lower than a worse on-time rating, but they were talking to the customer. In other words, they were late more often, but they were telling the customer they were going to be late, and they actually increased their net promoter score, into the high 8s, which is pretty amazing. So I went from like the 7s to the 8s, and they had worse delivery times. But it just goes to show, and I'll see if I can get that empirical data. If anybody would want that, if he would share the report, that would be great. It's a great case study because it really tells the whole story of what makes a happy customer. Communication.
I think from a customer perspective, the brands are trying to provide a customized product solution and packaged in a custom way to their customers. An example of that would be a skincare regimen for someone. They'll provide you the right products, they'll tell you what order to put them in, and we'll print a custom note for that customer specific to their regimen on how to apply the products. And we have the ability in-house now to be able to print that custom note as we put the package together. And that customization and touch for the brands that are marketing directly to their customers is a huge push.
Yeah, and why is that important? Because happy customers, they will reorder, right? And vice versa, an unhappy customer, you'll probably lose that customer. So if there's a high cost of customer acquisition, the customer order once and then you lose them, you're losing money. So for retailers, and Billy already kind of alluded to it, and I'll give you the acronyms because the panel this morning gave some acronyms as well. So I want to make sure we don't, we do the same. But it's NPS, Net Promoter Score, and CSAT, which is Customer Satisfaction Score. That's what keeps these e-commerce companies and retailers up at night. When they wake up in a sweat in the middle of the night, it's because what's going on with my NPS scores? And the reason is because there's a direct correlation between those scores and revenue growth. So if your NPS is going up, your revenue is going up. If your NPS is going down, you can bet you that your revenue is going down. So companies really see that, a big part of their success is really dependent on keeping those customers happy. And again, what makes them happy today is not going to make them happy tomorrow, right? Because we've already seen that customer behavior and customer expectations are, consistently changing. But again, I will say we do play a hand in how we set that right expectation. Don't set the expectation of you can have everything and you can have everything right now. And I think you have to do it by an industry to say what makes sense. And in certain industries, groceries, yeah, you want it same day, maybe in a few hours, not in 10 minutes. And maybe apparel, you want it in a few days. And maybe other products, you want it in a few weeks. So I think we need to look at some of the data, become smarter, and really understand that one rule of getting it fast to everyone doesn't always work, but getting more visibility to what is the right way to do it, but at the same, do it smart, meaning using the capacity we have, because I fully agree with Bill and what was said earlier this morning. There's always talks about capacity and shortage of capacity. Well, is there really, or are we just abusing it? Like in the long haul over-the-road truck driving, we're talking about already getting towards 80,000, shortage of 80,000 drivers. Well, ATRI also did a study that says if we can reduce the dwell time for every truck at a location by 16 minutes, it would completely negate the truck driver shortage. And 16 minutes, that's not that much. You see certain parts, you see the average detention times and dwell times are 4, 5, 6 hours, right? So that means if someone from a truck needs to go to an office to get paperwork, just that time to get out of the truck, walk there, get the paperwork, get back in the truck. That's sometimes a lot more than that. So we have to do it smarter. And again, that's where technology plays a role to give us the insights, to give us the data, to give us the connected tissue. And we also know we can't all do it ourselves, right? So for example, as a Project 44, we do visibility with that connective network, but we don't execute, right? And Bill executes, and he has a network. But for example, Project 44 and OneRail, we're partners, we work together. And I think that's where collaboration starts. Now we just have to make sure on the shipper side, we can have shippers collaborate more as well.
Thanks, Bart. So this is really going to be personalized for each of you. So how are your clients thinking about your role in making them a success?
Want me to start? Yeah. It's a lot of pressure. So our customers, it's somewhat terrifying. We get messages like, I'm going to bet my career on OneRail. That's always scary. Our customers rely on us for mission-critical deployment, period. Our customers have changed how they do business, which I've never had a business where customers will actually re-engineer how they do business because they know they need transformation that badly to stay competitive. It's really mind-boggling to me that that's what we've created. And the reason why is they simply, with the older methods, static supply, not having, the right type of supply, not having the ability to rate shop, not having the ability to provide a customer experience, those are mission-critical components that translate to stock price, right? And, we've had customers come to us and say, we need to save $55 million over 3 years. Ready, set, go. And so we do time study. We'll go on site and see how long does it take that counter person to put an order through, a delivery order through. 16 minutes, and you're going to do 60,000 deliveries a day? Like, that's the type of math, we get very granular with our customers. We go through a very discrete kind of value engineering phase to help them understand exactly what that ROI is going to be, and it lets them do business in different ways. And a good example of that would be one of our customers has a need for a 30-minute delivery. And in their particular industry, it's the auto parts industry, a repair shop will order from all three of the big parts companies, AutoZone, Advance, O'Reilly. They all get the same order for the same part. And what happens is whoever gets there first gets the sale. The other two have to go home. So the two parts companies that deployed the drivers that didn't actually fulfill the order, they end up not only wasting money on the delivery, because repair shop's not going to pay for that delivery because they didn't buy the part. It's a refusal. That becomes very, very, very expensive. So in this particular case, our customer had a 45 to 50-minute delivery time using their own trucks, and we now have them at that 30-minute mark at a 99% on-time rate, and that has changed how they can do business. And so very proud of that. We are not just a software company. We take a very logistics, supply chain heavy approach to what we do. We're gonna actually help you figure out how to transform operationally, not just with our software. It takes a little extra time, but in my previous company, we did took a similar approach, and we had one uninstall in 10 years. So that's just kind of a systematic way that we help our customers, and it means that they can offer new service levels. It means that they can sell during times of day they normally couldn't sell. They can have things delivered that normally they couldn't because they were just using one provider and they couldn't deliver over 50 pounds. So it's giving them the ability to sell more, a broader selection, gives the customer greater selection, gives the customer more options for timing, better communication, totally transforms their business.
I would say our customers are looking for us to be experts in every facet of their sales channels. So whether that is e-commerce, and e-commerce is not just shipping off of their website. E-commerce is growing their presence online, whether through its drop ship programs, through Walmart, shipping on behalf of Amazon, shipping HomeDepot.com, and all the requirements to be an e-commerce shipper for all those platforms. Then they also, so that's just e-commerce and the complexity of that. Then they expect us to be able to ship to mom and pop retailers and every major retailer in the US. And that, all of that, and all the different requirements for every retailer and all of that sophistication, that's what the brands are looking to us. They just want to be able to go have sales meetings and then turn to us and be able to say, you can handle it from a systems, technology, and a logistics perspective. So I think the key for brands these days is to expand it into as many sales channels as they can. That, I know this is an e-commerce platform, but retail is going strong. I do see a big shift from mom and pop retailers to major retailers. So the big winners kind of over the last couple of years has been e-commerce and major retailers, the largest retailers in the US.
Yeah, and for P44, it's providing visibility, and through visibility, the insights to make the company more efficient. We do that across all modes. Last mile, we got into that. It started with just connecting directly to the parcel carriers, but then we also acquired last year a company called Convey that was focused on kind of that final mile experience, all the way from pre-purchase to post-purchase, including returns. But really, it's connecting, being the connective tissue to connect to all of the carriers, get the data, get high fidelity data. So you can collect a lot of data. Doesn't mean it's all high quality data. So making sure it's the best quality data, you get it consistently, and then to provide insights. Now, do we have it all solved? No. One thing is that we continue to dive down into the data, and with machine learning and AI today, we can come up with a lot of new ways of looking at information, and we're going to make huge progress in the next 10 years as an industry. Because, for example, what we saw earlier on in the panel, when we talk about, for example, all of the black holes that you have in international shipping between all of the handoffs, well, you're not going to get that from real data. No one's going to give you all of those black holes. But what we're also collecting, or what we're creating, is what is called synthetic data. So it's basically artificially created data, but you have it based on all your previous data points, but you also have it based on the intelligence that your system have. So we're just at the start of that as an industry, but you can imagine that maybe in 10 years, 80% of all the data will be synthetic data, and the real data will only take up 20% of that. So we're going to get a lot better data. And then the other progression is, as we work with customers, is to say, well, you have visibility today that might, just that data in getting the information from all your carriers might become table stakes. Then it becomes more, what do you really do with the data to get more insights into how that drives your business, which means better predictive analytics, going into prescriptive analytics, and maybe in the future, it's a little bit further out, but to start automating some of the processes. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge, because especially in transportation, we're still very manual, right? And that's also why we have such a big opportunity in this industry. But there's also this mindset in transportation of everything has to be controlled by a human. If you go and look at functions in supply chain like manufacturing, and you would go to like a Frito-Lay plant, I can tell you there's maybe 2 people walking around there. One is the person cleaning the floor. The other is the person that does quality control, that gets some of the chips, takes it to the lab, and checks it. Everything else is fully automated end-to-end. Warehouse, we're starting to see more and more of that. We see AGVs, we see robots, we see all that stuff. And then you go to the dock door, and it all goes to manual, and it all goes to paper. So I think the biggest challenge that we have with bringing along customers on the ride is making them adopt to the technology, but really also helping change their mindset. One, we discussed it several times, to also collaborate to make them more efficient, but to really adopt more of the technology and help them automate more and more of their functions, rather than have that mindset that it has to be manual, that it has to be controlled by a human.
So you kind of like went into our next topic, which was really what kind of tech or investments are needed, and we're bringing kind of the carrier, shippers, and the customer, or the end user experience together. So are there any you would like to share?
I'll start with that. warehouse automation is crucial for two main reasons. One is our ability to get more orders out quickly. Obviously, that's crucial to how Amazon has changed the world. And the second is we need automation to control the labor costs, because labor is tight and getting more expensive by the day.
Yeah, I'd say another top technology which specifically has a lot of value in transportation is advanced analytics. So not your traditional business intelligence, but really using AI machine learning for analytics. It is estimated that by the end of this year, we have globally around 92 zettabytes of data. Has anyone ever heard of a zettabyte? I was actually at the University of Tennessee Spring Forum 2 weeks ago, and I asked that to a professor. He thought I'd made it up. But it is a real term, but it is, 1 zettabyte is about 1 billion terabytes. So we have a lot of data, right? And data has become the lifeblood of the supply chain. So we can make a lot of progress in using that data to really get good insights that drive our businesses. And that goes across all of the functions in supply chain. But I'd say transportation, because we are collecting so much data from suppliers, from carriers, from partners, from 3PLs, from customers. It's an ideal, function to use advanced analytics.
I'm still trying to get my brain around that. That's a lot of data. So micro-fulfillment, we haven't really talked a lot about that, and it's sometimes, I think, used as a buzzword, but inventory, having centricity around inventory, right place, right time, right inventory, right place, right time. I think there's definitely a need for more investment around micro-fulfillment, building out kind of another tier of warehousing that gets inventory closer to a customer, whether it's a B2B customer or B2C customer. That can be very, very helpful. It'll just further accelerate, again, resulting in less miles driven from a sustainability impact standpoint. We've done some micro-fulfillment. We understand how it works, and we see way more efficiency in the transportation if we can get product within 4 miles of a customer instead of 20 miles of a customer.
To that point, the brands have a lot of work to do to be able to control their inventory. They can barely control it in one warehouse.
Right.
Or two versus, warehouses throughout the country. So there's a huge gap in how the brands handle. And the micro-fulfillment, while is a valid discussion, it really only applies to brands that have high movers and low selectivity, because you take 1,000 SKUs and it's literally impossible to have it in 3-4 warehouses and get that correct.
It also has pretty big impact on OMS and WMS selection, and we're finding there's even really large shippers that still, in some cases, have a very rudimentary or non-existent OMS, which really limits your ability to pick, if you're fulfilling from store even, right inventory at the right store at the right time, if you're using your store as a warehouse. So yeah, great points.
So, everyone in this room knows we've had an e-com boom, and we talked about that from the result of the pandemic. It's obviously made it an extremely crowded marketplace, right? So along those lines, the small to medium-sized businesses are kind of struggling still with that, but it's not the end of the road, right? Like, what can they be doing to kind of keep up with the pack?
I think they have a lot of great tools. Actually, in some ways, I would argue they've had better tools faster than enterprise. So if you look at Shopify, you look at companies like Shippo, that provide rate shopping between parcel carriers and LTL carriers. They've had those tools, and they've had access, and it's a lot easier to implement them through a marketplace like Shopify or BigCommerce. Now there's word that maybe Deliverr would be acquired by Shopify, which would make that stack even more sticky potentially. But I believe that the SMB channel has had access to kind of ready-baked tools faster than big enterprise has.
I actually completely agree with that. I think that the move to e-commerce has given a platform for young entrepreneurs, and we actually, our whole focus is on small to medium-sized businesses, and we see a tremendous boom in young brands popping up because they have so many quality tools to be able to compete, and they're much more nimble than the big players. So I actually think e-commerce has been huge for the growth of small businesses.
Yeah, I'd say in general, 20 years ago, right, technology was only available to very large companies with very deep pockets and had a lot of people to go and implement it. I think that's now the incredible part of these cloud-based SaaS solutions, that they've become very democratized, meaning there are solutions out there for even the smallest of companies, and they use that as leverage to compete with bigger companies. But whether it's TMSs from free TMSs, whether it's for carriers, whether it's for shippers, whether it's for brokers, we see it on the visibility side as well. We see it in e-commerce. It is just a product that's become, as a technology, so much more consumable. So people have to kind of look, and we've seen that even with larger companies, larger shippers, larger retailers, where they say, you know what, these older systems, they're so hard to use, they're so hard to implement, and their thinking has changed. They say, we want something that's more consumable, meaning it's a lot easier to implement, we don't need that many resources, it's a lot easier to support, and it's a good, has a nice UI and user interface and user experience, because guess what? We have new talent coming into these companies, right? 20-year-olds, they don't want to look at these old screens. If it doesn't look like Facebook or something like that, they're like, I think I'll pass on this job. I'll go work somewhere else where they have cooler systems. So technology is also a very important way of positioning your company to attract talent.
Great. So to summarize, maybe kind of like Alan did on the last panel, if you could, choose one thing that everyone can take away from this particular session, it can be whether the issues, opportunities for investment, opportunities for technology. We'd love to hear it. So.
Yeah, I would say it's fairly simple. If companies haven't already in massively adopted technologies, maybe because they're afraid of it, they don't want to change. It's like, these disruptions, they're not going to go away. They're going to keep coming. The only way you're going to be able to survive is by transforming your business, and technology is one way to do that. Obviously, like I said, you need to change the organization, you need to change your processes, but don't be afraid of the change. Embrace the change, because the technology is making the change today so much easier than ever before.
I think the fundamentals of business have not changed. That we talk about all this technology and great, and technology at the end of the day is a tool. And we all need to focus on communication to our customer, understand what our customer is feeling, and at the end of the day, people do business with people. So I think that is very important, and what's lacking in business right now is people remembering to communicate with each other, and I think that is the key to utilizing all this technology as a tool, but not as the only solution.
One of the biggest things I've learned over the past few years is there doesn't have to be a loser when it comes to the ecosystem. I think a lot of times companies will talk about a courier that we approach and we say, hey, we want you to be on our platform. And they say, well, I would rather just work with the shipper. Well, it's not really an option right now, because the shipper has chosen a platform. And we're here to help you get that demand, and you can then do deliveries for our customers. And we get that question all the time. Do you compete with couriers? We don't compete with couriers. We enable couriers. And so I think the notion of a platform approach is something that everybody needs to embrace. Shippers need to embrace it. Couriers and carriers need to embrace it. The investment community, I think, has embraced it, and I think that's been evident in the dollars that have poured into the space. But understanding that interoperability helps everybody win. Having a truly, imagine, date myself, the days of cell phones when you had $10 a minute because you hit a different tower because you're driving along and all of a sudden you're roaming, right? That's kind of the world that this space lives in sometimes, where these two companies don't really do business, but yeah, maybe I'll charge an egregious cost, to do business because I don't want to be on your platform. And we see that. And that's holding shippers back. It's holding product distributors back. It's holding the industry back. And that's my biggest push, really, in building OneRail, is interoperability, and it just helps the whole industry grow. We have a policy at OneRail: we'll integrate with anybody. We would integrate with our competitor if our customer asked us to. And you have to be able to do that. You have to put the customer first. And in our world, it's the shipper. So.
Thank you all so much. I mean, it's a lot to think about. So what I thought I might do now is open up the floor for Q&A, if you guys have some questions for Bart, Andrew, or Bill. You're not allowed. I'm like, there, yeah.
Thank you all. Great job on the panel, by the way. So one of the elephants in the room for the e-commerce side is the reverse logistics side. What are you seeing now that's happening, right? So you think back to the days before Amazon bought Zappos, right? That was like the cutting edge of reverse logistics. So what do you see now, right? Because it's all about the consumer and what their expectations are. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on the reverse logistics side.
I mean, way under invested in, and companies are struggling on reverse logistics, and our own company is struggling with reverse logistics. It's hard, it's messy, it's way more expensive than the brands want to spend, and I mean, we handle shoe companies, and shoes are tough, you know, and it is the cost to get those goods checked back in and put back, if appropriate, back into stock is much more expensive than people give it credit to. I think that there's a lot of opportunity in reverse logistics.
What I see in general, right, you started seeing a few years ago companies specializing in returns technology. What I see now, and I think Bill can talk about it as well, where we see the companies that actually arrange kind of the last mile, the outbound, also start focusing on the return process to have much more of a unified end-to-end. Because I think if you don't do that, you lose track of it and you won't be efficient.
Yeah, one thing that's for certain is there's a direct correlation between a customer's propensity to order and their lack of friction in a return, right? The less friction, it's all about friction. The less friction there is in a return, the greater propensity I'm going to trust that I can order. I'm going to order more, I'm going to keep ordering. And it's not easy, and it hasn't been easy. Every one of our customers has had a similar mindset. Let's make this go forward the right way, and then we're gonna make it go reverse. And you know what we're seeing is really a kind of a fluid and flexible return transportation process. Bart alluded to, where we're taking our last mile providers, and let's take a retailer, Tractor Supply Company, who we do business with. We may have a route that's out there doing deliveries. We do have the ability to inject a return pickup into a route because we have dynamic routing. So that's where I think it's going. I think a consumer-driven, potentially even an app-driven, self-serve return process is the holy grail. And that was actually another thing I learned in my journey of starting this company. I bought a patio set, and it was a bad weld, and I'm a big guy, and I fell over on my head in my chair. I took the chair back to the store. I would have loved to have just taken a picture of it. It was a Home Depot chair, and took it back to the store. Sorry, we're not stocking this anymore. You can put it in a box and send it back to Hampton Bay, which I think is one of their brands anyway. And so there couldn't have been more friction in that process for me. But apparel, even more so. I mean, you sizing. So yeah, you need to remove friction, and flexibility in transportation and real-time connectivity will do that. It's great to be able to go to Kohl's and just throw some clothing on the counter and they take care of it. I think Amazon's done a great job figuring out how to leverage themselves to make that process easier.
Well, it's easy when you're Amazon and you just bully the brands. So they just put all the cost down to the brands, so it's easy for them.
Yeah, and I would say the problem is also getting bigger because you don't just have the returns from new product you're shipping, but with the sustainability, we see a lot of companies that now say if you have 5-year-old clothes or like IKEA, you have an old piece of furniture you don't want. So the returns business, in the broadest term of the sense, is becoming a lot bigger. So there's a lot more focus on it.
Okay, great. Do we have any other questions?
I'd love to get your reaction to, I read where Amazon is now outsourcing Prime as a service. And I would imagine it's primarily geared towards small businesses, but that was like that blew my mind that, you know, it's, and that with the Prime button actually on the small business's website. Would love to get your reaction to that development. I think Shopify's in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, the Prime button needs to be owned by one spot, right? And so majority of Amazon goods ship out of warehouses like ours, not out of Amazon warehouses. That's a miss, you know. And you can tell the difference, obviously, the boxes, you can tell by the boxes. But it really comes down to Amazon is making it more difficult for brands to put a lot of product in their warehouses. And that's what's pushing that Prime to third parties, because Amazon is basically making it so expensive to store goods. So if you have a lot of selectivity, it becomes very difficult to be in Amazon warehouses.
So I think it actually has a chance of working. Well, I go back to when we started OneRail, again, shipper-centric, right? Shipper-centric means we're not going to host our platform on AWS. No chance in hell. So we built it on Azure, and we'll always not host it on Amazon because we know how retailers think. I don't want Amazon to see my data, right? So that strategy will never work at an enterprise level, but I think it does have a chance of working at an SMB level because they don't really think that way. They don't think the same way that a Fortune 500 retailer would think. And I also believe, you know, the thing that's in question for me is the cost. You know, I think the cost was 15%. The question is, you know, can an SMB find a cheaper way to do that, you know, themselves through a Shopify or through a marketplace that's not Amazon? But I think it has a chance of working. I actually do, with SMBs only.
Yeah, it helps increase their volume. Again, if you look at the cost per parcel, I think globally we're looking at $10.10 per parcel for delivery. If it doesn't get delivered, it has to be redelivered. It goes up to, I think it's something like $17.8. Again, this is a global average. And typically out of that $10, a retailer only recuperates about $8 for people that pay fees for shipping. So the more volume you get, the more you can throw at that, the more you can optimize. Obviously, you can help bring your cost level down. And obviously, Amazon, great company. I've been buying from them since '96, but they probably have the highest percentage of revenue that is going to their last mile delivery cost more than anyone because of all the things they do. It's great, and it's great as a consumer, but it comes at a very high cost.
What's your guys' perspective on nearshoring, 3D printing? Supply chains are in flux. Everything's kind of getting reworked a little bit. Curious to get your guys' take on how that's going to affect e-commerce, if at all.
Did you say 3D printing?
Yeah.
I love 3D printing. So we have a 3D printer in our office. And one of the things that's on our roadmap is to actually sort of reinvent how things get fulfilled and delivered. This is a 10-year vision for OneRail. Not a 1 year, not a 2 year, not a 5 year. We're working towards a place where we can take, let's say, a parts manufacturer that has legacy parts they don't make anymore, and leveraging a desktop metal printer with an API and an SLA. And what we're doing now anyway is we're looking at the SLA, and Weston said Match.com. That's how we think about what we do. It's Match.com for delivery. It's really Match.com for fulfillment, right? We see the parameters. We see everything at the SKU level. This SKU is printable, and we have a printer in X location geography. We print and deliver. And there's 3 phases to that. The first phase is for us to have potentially a centralized market level printer, because this is going to take a while. The second phase, if it's a retailer, is to have 2 or 3 retail hubs that can print in the market. The third phase is going to take a while. And I akin 3D printing to the personal computer industry in 1976. It's kind of a dumb box right now for most households. It's really cool. You can print little army guys, but that's about it. That is going to get better with time. It's only going to get better and better and better to where a customer can actually have something fulfilled, and there needs to be, you know, we view ourselves as being in a great position to be that operating system that can carry the payload, because it's just another fulfillment mode. So, yeah. You touched on a nerve there. I love 3D printing.
Yeah, I think the nearshoring that already happened before COVID because of trade wars, tariffs, all of that. So companies were already looking at how do we change the network, how do we, where possible, do more nearshoring. So that's going to continue, especially the more disruptions you have, the more you look into that, where it makes sense. And yeah, I think 3D printing that technology is moving forward, and it's being used more and more, and you see some of the 3PLs really heavily investing in that. So where it's like instead of ordering it and shipping it, and maybe it has to come from a DC 1,000 miles away, it's basically being printed on a truck that's in your area. So it is a model. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think for some things it's great. Like, I don't know if some of you watch Jay Leno's auto show. So he has cars that are so old, you can't find the parts. So for example, for automotive parts that you can't find, 3D printing is great. But you can see a day where you could 3D print pretty much everything, right? They're talking about, I haven't tasted it, but 3D printed steaks. I don't know if anyone has tried it. I've seen videos of it. It's kind of weird to me, but they seem to be able to do that. So I think like anything's possible.
The problem I think that'll hold it back for a little while for kind of universal ubiquitous printing, it's the multiple substrates that you need to really make something work, right? How would you 3D print, an AirPod practically right now at a home level? You couldn't, right? So that's really what holds it back. And I think it's a 10-year journey to get to a place where there's ubiquity in 3D printing, where all of our houses have a 3D printer, and we're actually using it functionally. But that's going to come.
Thank you all. I know it's basically lunchtime now. So I want to say thank you to Bart, Andrew, and Bill. We really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.